into it. I swear. Look at this.
You all right? Oh. I doubt it.
I don't see any blood yet. Squeeze it. Some blood out of there. You got me hooked on these things.
They are habit forming.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. I'm not sure where Commissioner Bliss is, but the order I think we're going to go in is we're going to deal with the two demerit items first. We'll deal with them separately, and then we'll get into the maps. I'm going to start the discussion on the demerits. There's quite a few people get up here and say that trappers are being dealt with separately from other forms of hunting and fishing. I would encourage anybody to read the demerits. I have them in front of me here now, and I don't think that to be the case. On the private property one, if it changes, it's not only for trappers. It's for people shooting deer out of people's pivots. It's for everything. It's for hunting, trapping, fishing. And I agree there's some 6 demerit ones, and that's why I didn't want to change it. I wanted a new one. I still believe there's 6 demerit tickets, but I firmly believe in private property rights and people able to protect their private property. And when somebody does something very willfully, maliciously, they should pay a higher price. And that's why I want the second tier of demerits in there. And I did not at all pick out trappers. It's trapping, hunting, fishing. So that's that on that demerits. And then on the other demerits, they said that they're being picked on. These trappers are being picked on. I'm an upland game hunter. Well, I will be again when I get some time. I'm not working out of state, and I'm not going to Wildlife Commission meetings and all these meetings. But I'm going to work on being an upland game hunter again. If I shoot twice the legal limit of chucker, I get 9 demerits. If a trapper's twice the legal limit past the 96, he's still 3 demerits. If I have 5 birds in my bag, and the last jump of the day, bird gets up, I think he's clear, I shoot, I hit 2. I've got 7 birds in my vest. I'm not going to stash it under a bush. I've got 7 in my vest. I get stopped, I get 6 demerits. I'm looking for a demerit increase for a guy that's not 96 out. 1 bird over, I go to 6 demerits. It's right here. If I'm asking that if a guy, not if he's past 96, I didn't say to go to 6 demerits past 96. I said to go to 6 demerits 48 past 96. That would basically like saying, if I hit that 7th bird, it's 3 demerits, but if I hit 8 birds, I'm at 6 demerits. So you're looking for equality. I'm looking for it too. You read through all the demerits. I think that it's just bringing you guys up to par to where everybody else is already in the wildlife arena. I think you've had a pass for a while. We haven't had a guy come in with an appeal process because he'd been caught 6 times illegally hunting chucker. It doesn't happen. It's happened on trapping. Repeated violations, I think it's the cost of doing business. I can equate to that, and I'll probably get another quote in the Reno News and Review on this one, but it's no secret I have a habitual pattern of speeding. And when I get caught, I would take it into my secretary, give her the ticket, and tell her to pay it. And I figured it was a cost of doing business. And when I got caught, if I could get, and that ticket cost me $100, but if I got caught 1 out of every 100 times and it cost me $100, if I was getting more meters put in the ground, I was making a lot of money for that $100 ticket. And that's why I looked at tickets. But years ago, when I worked at the water company in Reno, I had a take-home car, and I was informed that I was no longer insured for my take-home car because I had too many tickets. The company was gracious enough to see it that I had a take-home car that year. It cost some extra money. But I was told that if I had any more tickets, I would no longer have a take-home car. It really had an impact on my speeding for a couple of years, basically until I left that company. So I know how habituation occurs, and I know cost of doing business, and I know if I can get a 3 demerit ticket, and I can get a 3 demerit ticket, and I can get a 3 demerit ticket, I'm going to continue getting those 3 demerit tickets because there's no consequence in the end. But when you face a consequence, your actions change, and you start abiding by the law. And that's what I think we need to do is, I'm not trying to change laws, I'm trying to change habits. And there's some things out here that we've learned during these trapping committees with trespassing and with habitual people that I think we need to change some habits. And that's why I brought those 2 things forward on trespassing and on, I think it's a pretty good pass. I'm not saying 96 hours goes to 6 demerits. I'm saying 144 hours and 5 days goes to 6 demerits. If you want to look at the way we do it with chucker hunting, over 144, we can go to 6 demerits. That might be fair. So I think that's a pretty good pass to 144, 5 days. So we can talk about both the merit issues, and then we can take an action on both of them. Anybody else have anything to say? Commissioner McBeth?
Where exactly are the 2 demerit?
We took that action.
I didn't hear you, Mike.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to locate the 2 demerit point issues we're talking about.
Okay, that was a recommendation of the committee in Las Vegas, the meeting that we missed our airplane coming back.
It's the second page of the support material, Saturday, April 5th, Las Vegas. Agenda item 8 and 9.
And for the record, the first motion passed 3-2, and the second one, Commissioner Drew lost battery on his phone and can no longer participate on the phone call after 8 hours. And so that one passed 3-1. So that's where those 2 items are. Anybody else have any discussion on the proposed, or the demerits? Commissioner McNitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just going to reiterate a couple things I said earlier, and maybe make comment on a couple of things. I did have one question. Paul, here comes that dreaded question you were hoping to avoid today, but I'm going to ask it. There's been a lot of concern with the sighting of per trap or per trap line, or I just need to get a feel from the agency where you guys come from on that. And if it's not clear, or we can't get clarification, I think it's important that we do, because it's a big issue, and I think that getting it clarified in some manner. I know that there's probably going to be some extenuating circumstances might dictate some of that, but I would like to hear a little bit from you if we could.
For the record, Paul Dankowski, Acting Chief Game Warden. It's by geographical location, so it's not by number of traps, but it's by geographical location, canyons that they're trapping. If they're trapping 2 distinct canyons, we would consider that 2 separate instances. That make sense?
Yeah, it does. So if they have 10 traps in one canyon,
We wouldn't add demerit points for each trap up that canyon.
but if they didn't get to both canyons where there are traps, that would likely constitute a second
Possibly
violation.
happen, yes. The fine might be increased by the number of traps that are in each canyon, say 10 in one canyon, 10 are illegal. The fine might be per trap, but it'd still be under 1 demerit points.
So here's my thought on it, and I do understand, that's a real important issue to clean up, and I still stick by, the thought that it's an important, change for me, because it may very well affect how I vote on some of these, things that might pop up later on, but, we heard the examples that people get sick and transmissions go out, and tires go flat, and things of that nature, but, we're talking, number one, 48 hours beyond the visitation period, for one thing. And if we have a transmission go out, we've heard some people say that they go out at 72 hours in case things do happen. So some trappers are already managing that. But let's say that we have the trapper that decides to go out at 96. He's still lawful, and he goes out and he blows his transmission on the way out. He's still got an opportunity that next day and even the day after that to go out and tend to his business. And I think that if they can't make it happen in that period of time, I think that we're getting to the point where those are the folks that I want out of the system, to be quite frank. I don't think it's helping the trappers' cause to have those types of incidents, and I think getting the people that can't comply with the 96 is very generous in my opinion, and I'm pretty comfortable with moving that direction with regards to that. I'm really struggling why, I do think that there are some, and this is not some folks I think do believe that it's just a cost of doing business, but I assume that the majority of trappers are lawful, and that they're not intentionally breaking the law. I don't think it's part of their game plan. So it shouldn't affect a lot of people, just the ones that are really not following the law. And is my assumption wrong? That this is going to affect so many trappers? I mean, that's I guess that's a question I've been asking myself. And I haven't really heard a good reason for why it won't change. I don't understand why where can people that have these egregious violations, I use the term egregious, why they're not, why it's such a problem to pull them out of the system. They're still going to get one mulligan on it, even under the current, even with the change, they'd still get one mulligan. So anyway, my comments, Paul. Thank you for answering the question. I think Jeremy. Hold on, Paul.
Maybe as a follow-up to that, I agree with the first part of what Dave said. In fact, maybe my memory is just really, really bad, and that could be the case. Probably too much caffeine. But I think we've had this conversation once before, and I recall it maybe being in Fallon, where we had a similar proposal in front of us, and my question was, can we better define how that gets assessed, whether it's per trap, whether it's per geographical area, whatever the case may be, because I'd be a lot more comfortable with that, and I was fine with that coming back, and I don't think we ever saw it come back. And so I don't know whether to take that as there's no way that we can really define that, or that it just fell off the radar. But I have no issue with increasing demerits for someone who willingly goes beyond that check time and doesn't make every effort to make it happen. And I don't know how you say willfully define that. I think the 48-hour thing, well, maybe not perfect, is probably a pretty good way to do it. It's similar to what Commissioner Robb said with the bird situation, but I do believe we need a little better definition on how those demerits would be assessed in a given case, because if it's per trap, it's a totally different situation. If it's per canyon, it's a totally different situation. So is there, I guess, do you see any way we could get some better clarification on how that would be enforced in terms of what constitutes an incident?
I'm not sure whether
And
that...
I don't need you to come up with it today.
Yeah, I'm just not sure whether that to be just an internal discussion amongst the Director Wasley and NDOW, or if that would need to be discussed with the commission. I'm just not sure of that process right now, but internally we can come up with a concrete scenario or answer to that.
Maybe a geographical region patrolled by the warden, because they should have pretty much the area they patrol. So if you get caught in one warden's area, every trap you have in there is one violation. If you go into, because these guys, longliners, they could be in 3 or 4 different wardens' geographical area, so maybe you could be subject if you were different warden or something.
Yeah, I guess we can, at some point, discuss all this and figure out how that would work. But I do agree it would be nice to have a concrete answer for everybody so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I guess to reiterate, I mean, what we're doing today is providing direction on how this commission moves forward. And if we move forward with this, I would like to see better definition. And I think my position on that's been the same for a couple of years, because I'm almost positive we had this. It's kind of Groundhog Day all over again.
And
For me.
I've known internally we've had this discussion over the years too, and I'm just not aware that it was ever put into just a concrete language or philosophical discussions on how it should be, but whether we decided on the one way it is going to be, I'm not sure that's ever happened.
Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the topic of the 12 demerit points on private property, I agree with you 100% on the private property rights, but here's a scenario. I think there's an entirely different thing from someone going out into your property and shooting a deer or something like that, or a trap and catching the property owner's dog or cat or whatever. But there's also a scenario where you have creeks and people fishing in the creek that runs across private property. And you're kind of going to get into a line of, do you know when you reach the private property? Did you do it on purpose? Without permission? Was it, how egregious was it? That's just one scenario that I'm come up with, and that's just because I have that situation in my backyard. There's a creek with lots that overlap across it. Yet, I do believe that you still have the right to fish that creek. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but
And that's why I wanted to make sure that it didn't change the 6 to 12. The 6 is still on the book, so the game warden could say, boy, you really didn't know where you were, 6 demerits. Or if the game warden said, I believe it's 12, you can make your case in front of a judge, and he can still take it from the 6 to 12 demerit, because he's got that authority to change it from 6 to 12, or 12 to 6.
I'd just like to seek a little clarification on Chairman Rob's definition. And AG opinion on this, maybe, on the willfulness of the act of trespassing is a willful act as it stands. I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but the way I read this is under our NRS, it says that it's unlawful for any person to hunt, fish, or trap upon land which is private property where the person has been warned by the owner or occupant of the property not to trespass in the manner prescribed in NRS 207-200. 207-200 refers to it being a willful act. And then it goes on how you have to mark your property so the person knows that they are trespassing. So I guess I don't quite understand how. I think that has to happen in the current 6-point violation. So how would we increase that to a 12, other than just no 6-point demerit violation, just a 12-point demerit violation? We're all looking at David.
It is willful as it's currently defined. Another way to look at this would be you'd have the situation like Commissioner Walsh just outlined, where the trespassing was not willful, it was inadvertent. So if you want to go down the path you're talking about going down, you may want to change the reg that you currently have about the 6 demerit point violation for trespassing and take it to where it is not a willful trespass. And then if you have a willful trespass situation, then that becomes the 12-point violation that you're discussing. If you're going to go down this road, I think that would be the cleanest way to go.
Yeah, before we get that far, we'll have to see if there's any appetite to go to a 12 demerit point violation for
I understand.
trespassing. If there is, then we'll figure out how to wind ourselves out of that.
And it is an NRS. Our regulation isn't and is NRS, so we'd have to change NRS.
Okay, and that makes it more difficult.
And I would just add that, right now, if it's not a willful trespass, we probably wouldn't issue a citation.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Commissioner Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna support the demerit point system the way it was presented in these motions. And I see that it is for hunting, fishing, or trapping. And I've seen those violations many times. And for the protection of private property rights, that's why I'm gonna support that.
Commissioner Drew?
So, Commissioner Moore, and maybe Commissioner Wallace, I know you both own significant amounts of private property where this particular instance could occur. And so it sounds to me that to be defined as trespassing, it has to be willful already. So I guess the question becomes, does it make more sense if we're going to go that route to say a trespass that results in private property damage? You know, something that's more egregious than just, hey, I was out there willfully or not? Because I think that's what Commissioner Rob's getting at, and it makes me a little bit nervous because I think it's managing by exception to some degree because we're setting this up for a particular instance, but at the same time, I get where you're going. I mean, someone intentionally set a trap on private property and caught the guy's dog. Not good. I mean, that's Bush League.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of gray area in between the two, and so, and Dag Newton, I don't know if is there a way to do that where you would actually inflict property damage, and would that cover a pet in that instance, or a farm animal, or whatever the case may be? Is that a cleaner way to do this? Because it sounds to me like this whole willful thing just doesn't make sense, because to be trespassing, you have to be doing it willfully anyway.
I'm not sure that I agree to be trespassing, you have to be willful. You could have two gates onto private property, one of which is marked and one of which is not. You're still trespassing because you're on private property. But if you went through the marked gate, that would be a willful trespass. If you went through the unmarked gate, that, in my view, would not be a willful trespass. So I think there is a distinction that can be made. The one is more of a negligent situation, the other is a willful situation. But to answer your initial question, yes, you could draft the language to where it dealt with damage to personal property. That's not that hard to do.
Or if they took a buck, that's, a deer's the property of the state of Nevada, so that would be a taking of property.
Yeah, that's a state issue, not a private property issue. I was dealing more with the instance of damage, injury to a farm animal or to a family pet or some of the other things that we heard at the various trapping committee meetings.
Because there's instances that I've talked to some landowners on that it wasn't poaching because it was during season, it was in the right area, just willfully shot in a pivot. So with it being property of the state of Nevada, it's still his property because he had a tag for the right unit, but do we get real gray then?
Well, I believe you're, under current regulations, you can't take an animal on private property without the property owner's permission. It's not a matter that the animal belongs to the property owner. It's a matter of the property owner's right not to have someone on his property doing things he has not authorized.
Okay. Commissioner Macbeth.
He took the words out of my mouth. The egregious act is being on private property.
Correct.
And we have jurisdiction to have that be on the demerit point system because it's involving the act of either trapping or hunting or fishing. And so, in my mind, I'm good with the way I think this is written, and I don't think it needs to involve any damage, any additional act of damaging, catching a dog or, anything along those lines. I think that the act, the egregious act is to willfully trespass. That's what property owners are concerned about. They do not, for a lot of reasons, want trespassing. And we, as the, it seems to me our policy should be to make sure that our sportsmen are respecting personal property, real property rights, property rights. And so I don't find it necessary to tie it to anything having to do with property damage. I think that the egregious act is the mere willful trespass. In other words, the situation where it's clearly marked, clearly posted, and the person shoots the deer in the pivot. That's all in my mind it takes.
Commissioner Drew.
So then my question to the two attorneys is willful the appropriate term, or is negligent a more appropriate term in this case? Or is it sixes?
Yeah, the statute currently says willful. So it depends on what you're trying to get at. If you're looking at trying, like I mentioned a moment ago, to differentiate between that situation and a negligent situation, then you have one scenario you're going to need to follow. And if you're not concerned about the negligent portion, then you just need to fix the language you currently have.
Would you be comfortable, Dag Newton, if we took a motion to go to 12 demerits and try to and have you and staff figure out how we can have a 6 and a 12 demerit point and then bring it back at a later date?
Yes, although as Chief Dankowski mentioned, the 12 is in a statute, and the 6 is in a statute, and so is all the language referring to the willful. So you're going to need a statutory change to do this, because all of that language regarding willful is currently in statute.
And maybe that was where my question became, is does it make sense to define it as negligent and not willful? Because it's, to be trespassing, you've got to be willful. In this case, you're being negligent in your actions. Or am I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to.
Well, I'm barely an attorney, so we're close. To get, if I understand where you're trying to get to, you're going to have a statutory change.
Either way.
Either way, because if you're going to try to back out the negligent part, you need to get rid of the current reference to willful tied to your 6 demerit point violation. You need to drop the reference to it's NRS 207 or 208, whatever. 207. You'd need to drop that reference out of your statute so that then you could define it yourself in regulation.
Commissioner Macbeth.
So what? Give me what is a 6 demerit point violation in regards to trespass involved? Because is it merely trespassing on private property? In other words, that everybody needs to know where they are?
It has to be willful, and it has to abide by 207. There's a duty to the landowner to have it properly marked and posted.
Right.
So it'd have to be willful, and under 207 or whatever it is, it has to be properly marked and posted and all that. So.
Okay, and so, and right now, what is that demerit point wise? And is it NRS?
No, it's actually an NAC.
Okay, it's NAC.
Demerits are in
So-
NAC, and it's 6.
So why can't we just raise the demerit point from 6 to 12?
You can.
And be done with it and not have any other types? I mean, that is the type of trespass that I think is the only one that we can deal with. And I can give you an example. For instance, on my brother's ranch, we have 500 acres on the base of Grafton, and there's no fence, and there's no indication whatsoever that that's private property. The only way that you would know would be to get a BLM map, and you'd see these white marks, and you'd be challenged to find them unless you had some equipment that would be able to locate it via GPS. And so, and obviously, we don't look at that as, it is literally virtually indistinguishable from the public land, and we have no problem with, the public being on that land. But, we do have, land down in the bottom of the Cave Valley Wash that is clearly posted. And so we would have a problem with a willful violation, willful trespass on that land. We got reasons not opening gates because there's cattle, and I'm sure that, Pete can attest to all kinds of different situations where there's a very good reason that these lands are posted. So I think the simplest thing to do is just bump that 6 to 12.
Any other comments? Commissioner Drew?
So I was the pain in the ass on this the first time, and I'll be the pain in the ass on this time. 10 years down the road, GPS technology allows you to know what's private and what's not. Are we going to start considering that willful if you don't have a GPS that shows land ownership?
You'd have to change the law, because there's a duty to the landowner that he has to have it clearly marked, so this
Okay.
time.
Understood. And then I guess the other part of this that I struggle with a little bit is going to a 12 demerit. I understand what you're getting. The penalty's pretty heavy. You could go to a hunter safety course and get 3 knocked off, I guess, but you're talking about potential of up to 5 years of no hunting, fishing, trapping, anything, anywhere. And that's pretty significant.
And I think it will change some habits, and that's what demerit points are about. That's what fines are about. It's protecting other citizens and making it a punishment that is a deterrent. It's not only a fine, it's a deterrent. And I'm looking for that deterrent. Anybody else have anything?
So I guess here's my next one, hypothetical. The situation got brought up where you're hunting on public land, and you take an animal that ends up on private land.
That's not.
We teach in hunter education to go ask permission to retrieve that animal. And if you're denied permission to retrieve your animal, get a hold of the game warden and let us work the details out.
I had an employee this year in that exact situation with a big bull he stuck with an arrow. And he spent more time trying to contact the property owner to make sure he was covered than trying to recover that bull. Anybody else?
One other point, and I don't know, the regulation as the proposed changes that I believe the committee asked for, did you guys ask for the doubling of the 3-point violations?
Just with respect to adding, or the trapper visitation after 96 hours was a 3-point violation. And the committee recommended to the commission that if that visitation occurs 48 hours late beyond the 96, that be a 6-point violation.
Okay. I just noticed that there was a provision in here where it says the person is convicted of committing a wildlife violation within 60 months after a conviction for the same violation, their points are doubled on their second
So on the second
conviction.
one, so we would change this from, because the 3s, that doesn't happen.
The 3s don't get doubled.
3s don't
and
get doubled, so the intent was to change it to a 6, so that if there is a second violation, so the first one, they get their 6 demerits, if that's how it all pans out. But on the second violation, that would be 12 right there, which kicks them up to a total of 18 if it's all occurring within a 60-month period. They can take their class or whatever, but they're out.
I guess I was just questioning whether the intent was to allow for the doubling of all of the 3-point violations.
No.
No. Okay, anybody else have anything? Commissioner Bliss.
I agree with the concept of this, but for the first offense and 12 demerits right off the bat, and the loss of hunt privileges for 5 years seems, is it 3 or 5?
It's 3.
3 years, right? Okay, so it's 3 years. I'm gonna have a hard time supporting for the 12, but I could support 9, because I think a person is gonna still get the same learning experience. I mean, he's gonna get 9, and he's gonna say, if I mess up one time on any little violation, I'm at 12. I'm done. But have a hard time with 12 myself.
Anybody else? If not, do we have a motion on trespass? Commissioner Macbeth,
Okay, I think,
will you pull the microphone a little closer so we make sure we get it good on the record?
I guess I personally think that the private property trespass willful is a pretty egregious act. And if a person does it and they can still go get a hunter safety course, and is this my understanding, that they can still go get a hunter safety course and knock 3 off?
I think once you hit 12, you can't take hunter safety. I think you're 12, you're done, and hunter safety is not the option. Because you can take some off to keep you under 12 before the next violation, but you hit 12, it's over.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this motion out. Then I would move to, with regard to hunting, fishing, or trapping on private property without permission. And is 503-240, is that an NAC? That's the NAC we're talking about? Or is that a reference to?
Yeah. What?
Is 503 is the wildlife statute.
I guess my question becomes, Commissioner Macbeth, before you get into the motion, is does it make sense to do it verbatim, or just give direction to staff to move forward with the committee recommendation?
503-240 is hunting, trapping on private property without permission. 503-240 is just hunting or trapping on private property without permission. Does not spell out fishing. So 503-240 is hunting or trapping on private property without permission.
Okay, so you would probably better just have a general direction to put forth a regulation?
I'd be fine with 240. I don't know how much harm you could cause. Well, you could let cows out fishing too, so yeah, however you want to do it.
No, wait a second. I'm looking at it right here, 503-240, unlawful to hunt, trap, or fish upon certain private property without permission. It is unlawful for any person to hunt, fish, to hunt, fish
Okay.
in non-navigable waters or trap upon land, which is private property, where the person has been warned by the owner or occupant of the property not to trespass in the manner prescribed by NRS 207-200, or where the signs are displayed forbidding hunting, trapping, or fishing without permission obtained from the owner or occupant of the private property.
Yeah, I just had the header. I didn't have the whole thing, and you do, so I'd go with what you have.
And then it says, any person using that private property for hunting, fishing, or trapping shall comply with the provisions of NRS 207-220. Okay, so So I think the motion is that with regard to a violation of 503-240, which is, involves the hunting, fishing, or trapping on private property, which is, and does the, because I don't have 207-200, 207-200 is the willful, that's the willful trespass provision? Okay.
It's the duty of the landowner, it describes marking.
Right, to create the willfulness. Okay. So the motion is that any violation of 503-240, hunting, fishing, or trapping on private property be increased from 6 demerit points to 12 demerit points, and that that any trap visitation violation in excess of 48 hours past the 96-hour limit be increased from 3 demerit points to 6 demerit points.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that, but I'd like to ask for one quick clarification, and I've made the mistake of referring to it after the 96 hours, but I think it might be better, considering that there might be conversations about other options, that it's 48 hours after the required visitation frequency.
I'll accept that amendment, yes, in case we, if we're going to make a change.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second with amendment. Are you up to speed on that, Suzanne? Okay. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Commissioner Drew.
I'm going to propose 2 amendments, just so everyone's aware. And the first would be move to amend the main motion that the recommendation on trespass go from 6 to 9 rather than 6 to 12. I'll second that.
So we have to take a vote on the amended motion. Okay, everybody understand the amended motion is from 12 to 9 on trespass. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Oh. What's that?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought that I heard mentioned before that if we get to this point, it does go to a judge. If it goes to a judge, there's a chance of the...
That's off the table now. Because we're changing everything from 6 to 12 in front of the judge if it was deemed willful. The judge doesn't have wiggle room now. As we changed it, we don't have a 2-tier, it's one shot now. Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner McNinch.
I'm not opposed to that consideration at some point. I think I would prefer personally to see the department come back with something, and if it doesn't look right, then I would consider something else. But for purposes of moving forward, I'd prefer to see the 12 written in there. It's just kind of where I'm at. I'm not opposed to it, possibly in the future, but I just would like to see the 12 at this point in time. So I won't support the amendment at this time. So.
Commissioner Bliss?
I didn't.
You're good? Oh, Commissioner Lane?
I'm sorry. I won't support the amendment at this time either. I would prefer to see the 12. Let's do 12.
Okay, I'll call for the vote on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Let's see the raise of hands on ayes. It's Wallace, Drew, Bliss. All those opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Macbeth, Morai, Robb, McNinch, Lane. Okay, we have okay. Now we still have a motion on the floor,
We have
but
a main motion, and I have a second attempted amendment. So